Hello, and welcome back for another installment in our Courtroom Confidential Conversation series. For this episode, please join me in welcoming Paul from Reporting Live from My Sofa. Hello, Paul. How are you, my friend?
Hello, hello. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I think what people need to appreciate too is that I have just met you. We just met a few moments ago before we started to record this. So this is going to
Yeah.
be fun for me. A lot of the questions I'm about to ask you, I have no idea what the answers are. So this is fun at getting to know someone. But I have been a fan of yours from your show, reporting live from my sofa. I want to get into where that name came from because I love it. But I guess the first thing, part of the reason we've been doing these conversations is you do have a huge following. You have over 100,000 subscribers now, people who really enjoy your content, but they might not know a whole bunch about you. And so that's the point of these conversations, is to find out a little bit about the creators in this true crime space. And you are one of them. So let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about World Before YouTube. Where did you grow up? What is your background?
So yeah, and again, I appreciate you having me on. That's really cool and awesome. And I grew up in North Carolina, in a town, well, like the Raleigh Durham Chapel Hill area, but in like a little town in that area and whatnot, although it's not little anymore. So grew up there, kind of lived around like probably my early 20s and late teens and stuff like that. Ended up back here, I guess at this point, maybe like 10 years ago, and I've kind of just stayed put or whatever. Like I said, I came back to go back to school as an older student. And so I'm very big on education. That definitely changed my life and like gave me direction in many ways and whatnot. And so yeah, that's how I'm just from North Kakalaki. I'm a country boy, kind of, sort of.
I love it.
If you ask real country people, they'd be like, he's not a country boy, but I
Right.
consider myself that.
I
So
think you
yeah,
have the credentials to back it up. We'll
I
allow you
know,
to go
right?
with it. I was reading over the bio, I think that you either have on your website or your YouTube page, and you talk about going back as a student, and one of the things you say is that you have a degree in English and creative writing. Is that right? Is that what you went back to school for?
Yes, yes.
Tell us about that. Was that a passion of yours? Is that something you still intend to pursue?
So yeah, that's funny because I started going back to school and it was more like wanting to, I don't even know how you would say it, like broaden my horizons or whatever you would say. So when I went to community college, I really gravitated towards English and stuff like that and whatnot. Now I was more of like a literature kid, if you would, a theater kid in high school, that type of stuff. So I was doing all that and befriended one of my professors, and she kind of took me under her wing. And I got very big into like short stories and, fiction writing, and did really well with that. And ended up getting like a pretty big scholarship and whatnot based on creative writing and whatnot. So that
Oh,
enabled me
wow.
to kind of pick where I wanted to go for another two, to finish my 4-year degree. And so that changed a lot of my trajectory. I wasn't really like it literally started off as like, I just want to broaden my horizons and do whatever. So then it was like, oh, okay, well now this is what you're doing. And so that prompted me to come back to North Carolina. I looked up the local schools here and really resonated with North Carolina State University. There were some writers there that I really liked. Belle Boggs, shout out to her, love her. And so really she was a huge draw that maybe be like, I want to go there. And so that's what I did. And I guess you could say, like, in my world, I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to kind of go the route of like publishing short stories and some whatever. Um, and obviously that hasn't happened. I mean, kind of, sort of, but not in that fashion, and being a professor and whatnot. And so then I ended up getting more into my true crime obsession. And so at this point, I see how I utilize my degree and all that kind of stuff and whatnot with storytelling and all
Yes.
that. But it's some of those things where, you start off on a certain path, like this is where I'm going to go, and it ends up going a little bit to the left and right and whatnot. And I'm doing the left and right and whatnot with
Yeah.
it.
No, I one of the things that a lot of people I'll see in the comments of your videos, really enjoy your storytelling, and I think that is such an important part of kind of the true crime community. Is it's not just reporting, right? Anybody can kind of sit down and tell you the facts of, such and such, you know, wife was killed by husband and buried under the stairs and all of that. But it's the story behind it and what led to
Yeah,
all of that that really engages people. And I think why people have such a passion for this. Well, we are kindred spirits because I was a creative writing major in
oh
college.
really?
Oh, yeah. And I'm not using it either, but it was kind of a passion of mine, and I think I picked it because it also could have helped me avoid taking certain math classes in college, and I did enjoy that whole world. And there was a period of time where I think I thought, I'm going to become a short story writer or a screenplay writer, but it hasn't worked out. But I think it has translated, like you said, to other passions that I now have in life. So you're at what point though does this crazy idea of, hey, I'm going to get on YouTube and I'm going to start this channel. And when you started it, was it with the intention of talking about true crime?
So yeah, and uh on that note, so what happened is, I graduated and, obviously I was like, okay, am I going to go to graduate school? Am I going to do this? Like, what's going to happen? Now, in that interim, I had met my partner and that kind of started changing things a little bit. Cause also remember, like, I'm an older student, so I already have like life going on and whatnot. Now, the scholarship thing enabled me to live in a bubble for a little bit of time and really pursue that. So, long story short, I get done with school and I'm kind of like, because one thing, and I don't know if you had this experience with creative writing and whatnot, but by the end of it, I was like, I don't want to write one more thing. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? I was
yeah.
so tired of research and writing and that kind of thing. So, backdrop to that is, I've always been into true crime, watching documentaries, reading books, that kind of thing. So my partner and I, we would be like sitting on the sofa watching TV, and I was a perpetual person that, and I still am. Like if we're sitting on the TV watching it, I'll be like, hand me the remote, and I'll pause it, and then I'll literally be like, okay, well look, this is what's about to happen. So and so is going to do this. It's so obvious that this, whatever. So he would be sitting there and he'd be like, oh, good Lord, here goes Paul reporting live from the damn sofa. Yeah, he's going to solve the world's problems with a bonbon in one hand and a remote in the other, kind of a thing. And so it was like this joke we had. And so we were kind of figuring out what we are going to do and whatnot. And, I'm just working like these kind of whatever jobs at that point. And I just had this idea where I was like, I wonder, and I knew what YouTube was, obviously, but not like I didn't watch true crime on YouTube. I didn't do like consume that kind of content in that way. But one day we were talking and I was like, I wonder if I made a video about one of these like true crime documentaries that we watched and I could put it somewhere like as like Facebook or YouTube or something, and like people could respond and see if they talk about it, and that could be my creative outlet. Because at that point, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to end up doing this writing thing, and I was like, that could be like my hobby, that could be what I do, for my little outlet or whatever. Um, and then I was like, I can name it "Reporting Live from My Sofa,"
Love it.
like we do, like whatever, and so we did, and we're in the process of moving and all this stuff. So we started off, and people who've like followed me for the very beginning, we had sold our townhome and we're doing camper life, and we were going to like travel around and be camp host at campgrounds and all this. So he would get his phone, and I would sit on like the camper sofa with the dogs, and he'd record it, and I would just be like, okay, yeah, so I watched this, whatever, and what, like, I didn't know how to edit, like I didn't know any of that stuff, but it was a hobby, you know what I'm saying? So there,
Right.
I had
Yeah.
no intentions of this right here at all, and it
Did you
just grew
even
from
did you even know at that point what the kind of true crime space was like on YouTube or any of that? No.
there.
You're
No,
just
no,
saying
not at all.
you're just
Mm-mm.
saying, "I've got some thoughts. Let's record it and throw it out there and see what happens."
Yeah, it was so weird. I mean, so now looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I found my way to that idea. It was just so, like, it was so weird. And I'm sure, like, I mean, this is a while ago, it's like 6 or 7 years ago. So I'm sure there's like conversations of like, maybe we would try YouTube or whatever. And I think the first video I ever did was Murder Mountain on Netflix, this documentary about this thing in California where they grow certain plants and like this whole world up in these mountains or whatever. And
Mhm.
and then soon after, this is how out of touch with like the true crime community on YouTube I was at that point. I was like, well, let me see what people are talking about in here after that. And I was like, what's this Chris Watts situation? And like that was coming
Oh,
up, and I was like, I've heard of this, because I was more familiar with older stories and like that kind of thing in the documentaries, and that was just tidying up. And so you already know, like I started watching stuff on that, and it was the end of that case and whatnot. So that's like the timeline of what the temperature was on YouTube when I started just interacting with that space.
at what point though, it must have reached a little bit of a a tipping point or a point where you started to get some traction and you started to realize, "Hey, I'm not just doing this as kind of a outlet for me, but people are watching this, and I'm starting to get people who are interested in what I'm saying." And it turns, from kind of a side hobby into, "Let me put some effort into this."
Yeah, I would say it kind of happened quickly in that realm, I guess. Um, and maybe like, because I think at that time, I don't know how this still works or whatever, it might be different. But at that time, I think you had to get like 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours or something like that to get monetized and whatnot. And I felt like again, this is just looking back. I feel like the 1,000 subscribe, like it kind of was like, bam, here you are all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like you got
Wow.
that 1,000 subscribers, like somewhat, several months, but quickly. And that's where I was like, oh, wow. And discovering the process in that of the comment sections, which
Yeah.
can be good and bad all at the same time, but the conversations that take place there were so interesting. It was very fulfilling in that manner, because that's what I was looking for, is that conversation and that dialogue and talking about these cases. And then again, that's when I started really getting into like the current true crime, because I feel like YouTube is like current true crime stuff or whatever for the most part. I mean, there's something out there for everything, but that's about when that started taking place, and it all just started clicking, where I'm like having these great conversations and meeting people, and just starting that interaction and meeting other people who watch true crime content and can talk about it in that realm.
Many people I've talked to, it's funny to me. They end up on YouTube and they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they never imagine themselves being in front of a camera, or they're even still to this day uncomfortable with it. Was that something that you ever struggled with? The idea that, like, oh boy, now I've got, like you said, first it was 1,000 people, now it's 100,000 people. Was that ever something you were uncomfortable with, or is that something that comes naturally to you?
I think I don't know how to say this other than it's not real to me, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Because
Uh-huh.
like I'm sitting here, like this is real. I'm talking to you, you know what I'm saying? But I'm still like in this room right here. But especially when I do my videos, and especially now or whatever, like to me, when I'm talking to the camera, I'm talking to somebody, if that makes sense, but like one person. Like literally, I'll forget sometimes. And when I go back in editing, I'm like, Paul, you literally are just taught like this is, if somebody watched this, they'd be like, what's wrong with him? Because I'm having this full blown conversation with the camera. Um, but like if you were to put me in front of a room of 100,000 people, yeah, I would probably throw up before I go in on stage, and then I would be fine. Like I said, I did theater and stuff in high school, and I would get so nervous beforehand. But once I walked on stage, it was like so much fun to me. And this is a little bit different than that, because again, it's in the comfort of my home. But like CrimeCon, whenever we go there, uh, I mean, I get like deathly like anxiety ridden sick on the way there, like whether it's flying or driving. I'm like, what have I done? I can't believe, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is the. And then once
Right.
I'm there and talking to everybody and meeting people, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So, but yeah, I mean, I never expected to have a following or any of that, but I guess I just don't think of it because it's just me and the camera, and I treat it kind of like a friend, because that's just how I view the community. You know what I mean?
You make absolute sense to me because yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I'm sitting in a room looking at a computer. It's hard to then realize that that is going to have an impact way beyond the walls of this little room that I'm sitting in. But when you go to something like CrimeCon, and I'm glad that you brought that up, it is amazing to see the impact that it has and the community of people who are into this. And I thought it was absolutely wild. I went to my first CrimeCon in 2024, the one that was in Nashville. Were you out there?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was blown away. It was wild. And I was so impressed with the enthusiasm of people and what a wonderful group of people everyone is, and how they just have this kind of positive, enthusiastic attitude about this whole kind of little niche of a world that we've carved out for ourselves. Was it wild to you to then be there and have these folks that you've been speaking to through a computer lens all of a sudden now are in the flesh and you're saying hi to them?
I didn't know what to expect the first CrimeCon that I went to, because I was like, you think of Comic-Con and things like this. I'm like, what is this? But I was like, let's go find out. I was so blown away by the humanity, by the
Yes.
empathy, by the friendships. It gives me goosebumps, makes me want to cry. By the human connection on so many different levels, like from the speakers um, that we had, what I'm saying, that were present and whatnot, standing in line to get a soda or whatever it is, and you just strike up a conversation like you've known somebody forever, on the level of making connection, of finding your tribe, kind of a vibe of like,
Yeah.
here's people that you could literally be like, you don't even know them, and be like, so what's your theory on the John Bonet case? And you just immediately start talking about whatever, you know what I'm saying? And so I tell people, like, oftentimes, like, in the community and whatnot, when they're talking, they're nervous to go. And I'm like, people don't believe it, but I'm like, I'm super social anxiety, super low self-esteem. If I can go and like, anybody can. And I'm like, you don't need a friend to go. I mean, I get you want to do stuff, with other people, but I'm like, you'll make friends instantly, right? Everyone is so wonderfully nice. I've never seen anything negative there in that context. And then also to get a heartbeat on the people involved in these cases, their stories. One of the things that really pulls me into true crime is the human experience, human resilience, and the ability to go on. And, mostly speaking of the victims surviving, people of like victims and whatnot, and this life that they were thrown into, that they didn't ask to be thrown into, obviously, and that ability to overcome, and then all the way going to something like CrimeCon, getting on a stage in front of people, telling their story, and how much that does for other people to witness that and hear that and see that. It's absolutely amazing. And so it was completely not what I was thinking, at all. And now I'm literally like, I mean, I booked my tickets like the next year. I'm like, we're
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. 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 No, I called my wife and I'm like, this is mind blowing. I had no idea. I don't know. I think I was in your same spot. Didn't know what I was going to expect entirely. And I was just blown away by the kind of positive vibe, like you said. The energy of the whole place was really incredible. So I highly encourage anybody to go check it out if you're interested in this true crime world that we've all involved ourselves in. One thing that you said that I really want to compliment you and the community that you have built and attracted is how you are very victim oriented and do care a lot about the victims and bringing them the proper amount of respect and everything. So I appreciate that and wanted to compliment you, make sure I complimented you on that.
No, thank you.
Do you primarily concentrate on doing recorded videos or live streams or a mix of both? What is the kind of channel you're hoping to grow?
So what I do is pretty much a little bit of both. I have two separate channels. So there's the main channel reporting live from my sofa, and then there's the reporting live from my sofa, the podcast channel, and that's the main one that I go live on and whatnot. Now I'll do like major, what do you say, like events and stuff like that. Like I'll go live on the main channel, but people at this point look to my other channel for lives because that one's more casual. Honestly, it's more messy. You know what I'm saying? Where I'll just be like, we got to talk about this. Like it's not structured and whatnot. And the main channel is more recorded videos, things of that nature. So it's almost kind of like both because I enjoy both platforms. I think they each bring something different to it.
So talk to us a little bit about the recorded videos. What is the work behind going into that? Because I think your viewers especially would appreciate knowing sometimes there's a tremendous amount of work that can go into putting together a video, from the research to the editing and all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And so I do kind of like a blend of different style videos. I do a lot of reaction videos to content. A lot of people are going to know me from Sarah Boone. I mean, that just kind of wrote itself, that scenario. And then I'll do other things like I don't know if you want to call it storytelling, but just talking about a case and whatnot, or commentary, things of that nature. But regardless of them, yeah, for me, what I have to do is find something that interests me. That's the first criteria or whatever, where I'm like, huh, like, what is this? It makes me stop in my tracks, kind of a thing. Um, so that's the first thing. And then once I go into it, I find different dynamics of it. Now, when you want to talk about like the technicalities of, you know, editing, recording, all that kind of stuff or whatever, yeah, to me, that's where I'm like, I guess you could say like content creation of any kind really is just time consuming. You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh my, like editing, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that part is so. Now I have people that help me with that at this point, but I still do edit some other stuff and whatnot. Um, but that would take me hours to do, like just sitting there and going through it. And I'm also, I mean, I'm not no spring chicken, so I don't know how all that stuff where I do stuff where probably like a 22-year-old would be like, "Why don't you just press this button that does that instantly?" And I'm like, "Are you
Right.
kidding me? I spent 8 hours doing that." You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Like
right.
that's my life story. So probably when I'm saying takes 8 hours, like a younger person would be like, "Yeah, that's like the click of a button." But I mean, it is what it is, right? So yeah, between all that, like a video, I mean, that can take, and it depends, like I would imagine like if you're talking a Stephanie Harlow kind of video, that takes her like a week to do. You know what I mean? I don't know
Yeah.
personally, but like that's like super in depth. For me, it like a typical Sarah Boone reaction thing could be like a day or two, depending on how in depth it was or whatever. But yeah, I mean it's definitely time consuming, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
also interesting. I think with true crime specifically, if it wasn't interesting on some level, it would be awful because the stories you're reading, it's just they're about terrible people most of the time doing awful things to decent people. You know what I mean? So it's almost like there has to be some interest level in it to like enjoy doing it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Talk to us about that interest. What do you find are the cases that fascinate you, or the cases that you gravitate towards?
So I feel like I gravitate towards like a couple of different things. Usually I will find interest in the absurdity of some aspect of the case. And again, I keep referencing Sarah Boone, but it
Well,
is what it
talk
is.
about absurd. That's a great case to reference. Yeah.
I mean, come on, right? So there's two different things, like something absurd like that, because at my core, I come at life with a, if you don't laugh, you'll cry your eyes out kind of vibe. So I come at life through a humor lens and whatnot. So I'll find humor in some things like with Sarah Boone and the ridiculousness of her actions. Now, also at the center of that, whether it's her case or other cases, whatever, there's also, what I just call the human dynamic of it. So when you start looking at the victims and then what they went through, at the hands of some of these absurd people like Sarah Boone, like the life that George probably unfortunately was living or had, went through with her, and the psychology behind it. I'm very fascinated by that dynamic of it and like, how the human brain works, how we each go through different things and how those resonate with us, we overcome them and that type thing. So it's usually those two different things that will attract me to a case.
One of the things I appreciate that you do is that you always kind of begin your videos by saying, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. Like, this is just you trying to give the facts. But why? Tell us why that's important to you to explain to people, and what is the lens that you're trying to bring to these conversations?
So for me, like when I say that or whatever, there's a couple of things going on. So like if you take you for example, like you've gone to school, you've done this, you have like this degrees. I mean, these are very difficult to get, and so you have that level of perspective, education, and all that to go through. So one thing I started seeing early on is where in the comment sections people would be like, "Wow," almost like referring to me as a lawyer and whatnot. I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely not, right? Like, I do not know what I'm talking about, okay? Like, these are literally my opinion. Because in my world, when I make the videos, I am still sitting on the sofa with Matt, with the remote, just talking from the sofa, right? You
Right.
know, that's what I'm doing. So I'm just like, look, I don't know any more than you do, right? And that's one thing that I try and make clear because, I at the end of the day with these cases and stuff, like we don't know. Like we weren't there. We weren't the victim. We weren't the perpetrator. We weren't on the jury. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we and what I mean we is like the viewers and people like that, we're looking at it from that perspective. So that's why I always like to make sure where it's like, look, I didn't do, I don't have those credentials, right? It's just me and the sofa, and my opinions based on that. And so it's just big to me, almost like out of respect to people such as yourself who do have those credentials, but then also just as like a do your own research kind of thing, right? Don't believe it. Like it's just my opinion. Like I'm just Paul,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, well, the reason I like that you highlight it too is I think it does. I think this is a space where anybody can kind of have some thoughts and perspective on it, and you don't necessarily need to be a lawyer or a doctor to weigh in on some of these subjects. That this is just kind of, we're talking about human stories, and we're all humans, and this is your unique human experience that you're bringing to this story and how you feel about it. So I appreciate that you kind of highlight that in your videos. Let's take a step back though, because I do want to talk a little bit more about the journey. So I didn't want to fast forward through all of the starting on your couch. Here's a video. Tell us a little bit about that journey from where it goes from a fun hobby, a creative outlet, to now it's taking up more of your time. What were you doing in your day job during all of that, and where has that landed you now?
So yeah, so prior to, and I would say prior to, YouTube has been overlapped with like I don't know how you would say it, like a regular job or whatever for the whole time basically until recently. So I've done several things. I mean, I've worked at salons, I've done usually creative type stuff or management type stuff. And my most recent thing is I was working at I don't know how you would say it, but places that do credentialing for people with, like yourself, attorneys, doctors, things like that, like professional testing, things of that nature. Um, and so there I was working around very nervous people all day long that are taking life-changing examinations and whatnot. Um, and so that's really what I was doing there, and then also doing the YouTube thing. Now, the YouTube, and I'm trying to even remember because I'm also going back to that 2020 time zone there where work was kind of crazy because everything shut down, and then it was like, okay, we're kind of rebuilding, like at least in my company. uh you're having to travel to DC and do this crazy stuff, and then in the background doing YouTube stuff at the same time. And that just, I look back on that time and it was so busy and so crazy. And again, like I was talking to you, I've always loved being like, I loved my job and whatnot. Like it was really, really fun. And I like the people. I like going and not talking about true crime in those moments. You know what I mean? And having like a different vibe going on during the day or whatever. But then as this got busier and busier, and then personal life got busier and busier, that became less of like a, I don't know how you would say it, like it made more sense to focus on content creation and things of that nature and whatnot. Um, and almost like a thing of like going out there on that limb type situation. I mean, I would love to still like write a book one day. I would love to go back to school. I would love to I've actually recently looked into going back to school for a law degree, things of this nature and whatnot. I don't know if I can handle that at this point, but, you so, so I was just sitting there and I was like, okay, Paul, you either need to like kind of jump off the cliff of the unknown and just go for this and see where it goes, or reel things in and restructure life, because I was kind of burning the wick at both ends, as they say, and something had to give. And so, yeah, so there's that.
Did you ever reach a point where you thought that you might give up the YouTube thing and just be like, you know what, this is a hobby and it was fun, but I've got way too many spinning plates going on in my life and I've got to kind of concentrate.
Oh, like 10 minutes ago.
Right.
Like at 8 o'clock this morning, 10 o'clock this morning. Yeah. I go through, I mean, that's the roller coaster of my life right there. Yeah, 100%, definitely. Because again, I didn't start off in YouTube as thinking it would be literally really anything. And even now, I guess because I don't know how to say it, like it's not that I don't consider it real, but it's like a little bit of that. You know what I'm saying? Like where to me, I'm kind of like, oh well, this is cool right now, but it's like a resting place in life, if that makes sense,
Sure.
and I don't know how to explain it. I never meant for this to happen. And so now that I'm here, I'm like, oh, cool. There's definitely things in this realm that I would like to explore. Like I said, going back to school for a law degree or writing a book or whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean, I can remember like when I hit 2,500 subs, and I mean, that was like the 2,500 people subscribe to my channel, please. Like that was like I was, Tom Cruise, and I was like, please, like that's that level of fame, right? And
Right.
we got a cake, and we did, I mean, all the fun stuff and whatnot. And I mean, I can remember it leveled out around there, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this was cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is what this is. It's my hobby. I did this, great, make a little bit of money, pay for some groceries here and there. And I've met all these cool people. I can conversate about true crime. So it's always morphed along the way to something I didn't ever anticipate it being. So, yeah.
What tell us about some of the stuff that has surprised you in this journey. Like what was some things that you weren't expecting, either good or bad?
And do you mean like with cases or life or like what?
I guess both. I guess, because the theme that I'm getting from you is that you kind of have followed this without and I mean this in a very flattering way, but kind of followed it where it takes you rather than trying to lead it somewhere. And I'm
Hmm.
curious, as you've kind of been along for the ride, have there been things that have surprised you? Like for instance, you said that you were surprised, I think, a little bit by kind of the response from people at true crime. Have there been some things that maybe have surprised you as far as them being more of a struggle than you anticipated, or just only good stuff?
So yeah, so a few things come to mind. So first of all, like as I was doing this and whatnot, like, I guess getting like spotted out in public, and it hasn't happened that much, but like these very bizarre random times, which are flattering, like being in the mountains of North Carolina at a grocery store at a Piggly Wiggly, and somebody recognized me and being like, "What?" Like that's so weird. But totally cool. Then at work too, I try to keep that very separate and never told anyone about it except my regional manager. And so literally I would like put these blinders. I can remember coming into work one day and one of my coworkers being like, Paul, I tried HelloFresh. Have you ever tried that? I really like that. I've done sponsors for it. It was like so random. And in my mind, I was like,
Mhm.
they know that they've watched me. But me completely not acknowledging, I'm like, I love HelloFresh. It's really good. Okay, so here's the list for today. You know what I mean? And just pretending like that. And everybody coming to me for true crime, but no one talking about it.
Right,
Um, because at one point, like with me being the boss, I was like, I don't know how that works. I don't know if that's, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
and then people like when the lawyers would come in, like we would do these mega testing events for attorneys. And that would be the days where people would be like, oh my God, Paul, like what are you doing here? Like I watch your channel. Those kind of things were like, oh wow, this is real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, Now another thing is when we would go to true crime and we would plan out these like little meet and greets, like, especially like even the last one. And my friend Derek, shout out to Derek, he helps me along with Emily and everybody there, and we would plan a meet and greet. Well, I would be shocked when people were there. I was like, "Oh, there people actually showed up to this?" Like, to me, it's so weird, right? I'm like, "Why would anybody want to hang out with me?" But then, like, even at the meet and greet, we would be sitting there and like at the thing, like there's people hanging out, and you're going around talking to people, and like this one couple, I felt so bad, but I thought that they were just sitting near the group and they were ended up talking to people in the group. And so I went to talk to them. They're like, no, we were here for you. And I was so surprised. I was like, oh, I just thought that I didn't think that, I mean, like, it
Right.
just surprises me that people would want to talk to me. And I
Yeah.
guess I'm like divulging my like low self esteem or whatever. Right. But it's just, so that dynamic of it where people are like interested in it and like, oh, we want to engage with you, and that kind of stuff has been, kind of surprising to me in a good way.
That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that you're starting to get a little used to it, and I think you should because people obviously are responding very positively to the stuff that you put together. Um, Talk to us. People are curious. First of all, also a shout out from the Courtroom Confidential community that we've built because your name had come up more than once as somebody that they wanted to hear from. So thank you again for doing this.
No,
But
cool.
one question that we get from people sometimes when doing these interviews is they want to know kind of what is a typical day or work week look like? Do you have it kind of structured? Okay, I know I'm going to do this video and I'm going to do a live on that day, or are you just shooting from the hip every day and just kind of responding to what's happening?
So yeah, for me, it's I shoot from the hip. Every day is completely different. I've usually got a lot of stuff going on in my personal life and whatnot, which has kind of like been pretty heavy the last couple of years, and so it's kind of like a juggling a bunch of different things. I'm trying to going into this year structure things more with like a solid upload schedule on the main channel, solid live chat channel, or upload or whatever, live chat stream on the live chat channel. um, so that's really what it is. But I mean, so usually every day I record something, and whether it's for whatever, but yeah, every day I record something, and there's usually like a overlap, obviously, of doing some kind of research and whatnot. And so I'll have several different things going on. So like right now, for example, like I'm very much watching the Natalia Gray stuff that's been going on, as well as reading Sherry Frankie's book, doing stuff on that, as well as making timelines for the Megan Boswell trial coming up that I'm going to go attend. So I have like these several things that I know are taking place that I juggle. And so I probably work harder, not smarter, if that makes sense. Because then there's also in that mix of, well, what interests me? Like I'm not good at being like, oh, pretend like topic A is trending over here. You should do that. But if it doesn't interest me, I'm like, you know, I kind of gravitate to whatever is like currently of my interest and whatnot. So yeah, I just end up kind of all over the place, and I think that people come to expect that of my channels. Where it's like, look, we don't know when he's going live again. It can be whenever. And so I'm trying to reel that in the coming year and moving forward. Of like, let's get down to like a solid pattern and make a commitment to that.
I'm so glad to hear you say that about how you kind of only cover things that interest you rather than trying to anticipate what it is that people are looking for because it creates a unique voice in you because sometimes you might be exposing people to cases they don't know about. There seems to be always that ongoing big case that's in the news that everybody's talking about, and sometimes it's refreshing, I think at least, to see other channels that say, hey, I found this little kind of not overlooked case that I think is fascinating, and here's the reasons why. And you'll find a really positive response to that. So I guess my question is, you mentioned a few cases. If you could tell us a little bit more about what is coming up that really is something you feel like you're going to be putting some time and effort into talking about and covering. You referenced a couple of cases already.
So, a couple of things going on. So, there's a local case to me. Again, I'm in North Carolina. Avante Devon is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. She is currently incarcerated. She is awaiting trial for some very heinous charges in relation to two of her adopted children. It is literally like one of the most next level things I've seen. And it just keeps unfolding. So she has a hearing Thursday, I think, that I'm going to try and go to. So that's like at that stage in the game. You know what I'm saying? Like at that level. Like I said, Megan Boswell. I would actually like to really try and go out to the Lori Vallow trial in Arizona. One thing that I'm trying to do this year is to actually go to the trials and hearings of these ones that I'm able to do now that I can kind of travel a little bit more. Um, and do that perspective of it, especially in the frame of mind of being like, well, maybe I'll go back to school for a law degree and whatnot. I feel like that would be the next step is like, okay, Paul, you need to actually like maybe attend these hearings and go to these things and get that level of a perspective on it. Um, and so, yes, and then like, you know, like I said, other cases, I'm deep in the trenches of Sherry Frankie's book. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. So glad that she wrote that book. I'm so proud of her for getting her story out there. And I've connected to several things in it that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is why I love people sharing their stories and whatnot.
Tell us a little bit about that case for people who might not be familiar with it.
Yeah, so Sherry Frankie is the daughter of Ruby Frankie. Ruby Frankie, her co-defendant, if you will, Jody Hildenbrandt. They are currently incarcerated. Or I'm sorry, Ruby Frankie was the host of Eight Passengers, a very viral family vlog channel. Uh, you know, and then her and Jody met up, and it was like the evil forces joined, and it, you know, horrible things took place. One of Ruby's children escaped from Jody Hildebrandt's house, malnourished, lots of, you know, very bad things done to them at the hands of Jody and Ruby. And so Sherry Frankie, the daughter, published her memoir to
How old is
basically
she?
a I'm not sure how old she is at this point. I mean,
Okay.
in her 20s, something like that. I mean, she's an
Yeah, she's
adult,
got to be young. Yeah, but she's got to
but
be
still
young, right? I
young.
mean, yeah, yeah.
So but she published her memoir, and it's really the lens of like, this is what it was like. To me, it's two lenses. Growing up in a YouTube home against my will, you know, and you're getting that perspective of a child who's like, oh, mom started this YouTube thing. Well, life will go back to normal at some point. And like, as we know, it certainly didn't. And then the perspective of growing up at the hands of an abusive, you know, mother, and then eventually a mother in Jody. So you have these multiple layers going on, and it's so beautifully articulated, especially if you know, you've been with your writing stuff as well, would appreciate how she tells the story. She narrates the Audible book. That's what I'm doing, and
Oh
or
wow.
that's how I'm, you know, reading it or whatever you want to say, listening to it. Um, and it's just a beautifully written story that's also absolutely tragic and heartbreaking at its center.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that I did not know that she had that out. I'm gonna want to check it out because I do feel like there's a lot more to that than people know. Like I followed it superficially enough to know that, oh God, this horrible situation. And they, you know, the irony of the fact that they had a YouTube channel all about childcare, but they're doing all this deep, dark stuff behind the scenes. So I will definitely check that out. Um, you
Yeah.
you kind of skipped over this, but referenced it shortly earlier before that you are at a point now where you've made a pretty significant career change as far as your day job to your YouTube job. Can you share with us what has happened recently for you and what does that mean for you with the future in the channel?
Yeah, so as of recent, well, so really like last month or whatever, I officially gave my notice at my regular job, if you will. And you know, like, and people who have followed
Congratulations.
me, and thank you, I appreciate it. People who have, especially people who have followed me for a long time, will know, like when it first started, and like we would be watching a trial or whatever. It was almost a given that if I was like, I either have to work or I'm going to go cut the grass, that is when a major bombshell in a trial would happen. Like the verdict's
Right.
in, or what, like it was like always that, and people would always joke about it, and it was like what I became known for, whatever. So as I was going with my job, you know, and again, it was really bittersweet because I just started, you know, I stepped down as the manager, cut my hours back the more and more I got busy with YouTube, and I was leaving it at a, you know what, I'm going to just come in a few times a month or whatever. But then inevitably those days something major would go down. And it was like, especially now with more traveling coming up, it was like, okay, I'm going to come in and say XYZ. Well, then it'd be like, well, now I have to go here. And I really just sat there and was like, you know what, Paul, I know what it's like to, manage people, be in charge, and I'm going to now become that pain in the butt of constantly rescheduling. And so it's like, what is best for the business? And I liked everybody I work with. I consider them my friends, and my manager is not like literally the best people I've ever worked with. And so I was like, I don't want to do that to them, and I don't want to become that unreliable person that's constantly changing and constantly doing that. So I kind of bittersweetly was like, you know what? I just need to step away, and then I can always go back to it. And so in doing that, that's where I'm also now like, okay, I want to go more boots on the ground. I want to really like kind of look into some of where my interests are going with this, which is like really getting deeper into some of the cases that I'm doing, looking into, potentially going back to school for a law degree, like those type things. And like, that's where okay, I'm going to try and go to these trials and, these hearings that are coming up and really experiment around with that and take it to that level and just kind of see if that's where that needs to reside, or if I just need to stay in my little studio room, with my cup of coffee and my camera in front of me and crawl to CrimeCon once a year. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So,
I'm so glad to hear you saying that. I'm curious what about the experience of going to court is something that you feel like is important for you to do more of? Because I try to encourage people all the time, if they have an interest in this world, go to your local courthouse. If you think that drama in these true crime spaces can only be found in these cases that are being covered by court TV or high profile, you got another think coming. Go to a local courthouse and just walk into any random courtroom, and there is drama like you wouldn't believe taking place. And I encourage people to do that. So I'm my question to you is, what was your experience and why do you feel that's important for you moving forward to do more of that?
so one thing, like we talked about going to I'm sorry, CrimeCon and whatnot, and interacting and meeting people who have been affected by the crimes and things of that nature and whatnot. Um, That's really big to me, that kind of human connection. Now, also, so for example, I'll use the one coming up, Avante Devon coming up. Um, I'm interested to see, like, the questions that go through my mind are, what is the energy like when she walks into the courtroom? What is she giving off? What was it like for those kids? Like, if you think back, like, okay, this is what she feels like with me in a courtroom in this kind of controlled environment. What was it like for that little kid who was scared to death of her and that energy came into his living room or their living room? What was it like through that perspective, through that lens? What did they feel like, to get that kind of energy, and then just the legal proceedings of it and whatnot. Um, and in doing that too, like for example, going to Fayetteville, I want to go by the house to be like, how close were the neighbors? What the proximity of the houses. This is a case of like kids being missing for years and not being seen type thing. So I know that's not in the courtroom, but just the local aspect of it. But a lot of it is just that, the Alec Murdoch case. I didn't go to that, but I was very curious. What was it like when he walked into that courtroom? What was his energy? What was it like looking at him on the stand? Because you get a human element in person that you don't get through the screen. Just that spidey sense, that sixth sense, whatever you want to call it, of, is this person lying? Is this person full of it? Is this person exude evilness? Do they, is there anything left in them? Oftentimes I think about with a lot of these perpetrators where I'm like, how are they able to put their head down at nighttime and close their eyes with these things that don't, with these images, like, wouldn't they haunt them, or are they not capable of that? And I feel like when you can be around someone and look in their eyes, you get that connection, you get that sense of, there's nothing there, or there is a human in there, but something went way wrong at some point. So I'm kind of hoping to gain that perspective, and then just as, just the experience of it.
There really is, you put it so well, there really is no replacing it. You know, having a camera in courtroom is great. And now it seems that Court TV and those other outlets have even upped their game, that they'll now have multiple cameras in courtroom, and they're cutting to the defendant's reaction and the witness and everybody else. but you make such an excellent point that there's so much nuance about just the energy brought into the room, the glances between the parties, the reaction from the defendant, all these things that just simply can't be picked up. It really cannot be replaced. Paul, this has been a absolutely fascinating conversation, and I thank you so much for your time. What is people can find you on Reporting Live from Your Sofa on YouTube, but do you have other social media or websites or anything that you want to share with people?
I have my Instagram, same name, but with a one after it, reporting live from my sofa one that I do stuff on. And my two channels, like I said, reporting live from my sofa and then the reporting live from my sofa, the podcast. And that's it. I've started TikTok recently, but that's just, whatever. So we'll
If
see
it
if it's
if it
still
if
here or
it
not.
lasts, right? If it lasts for the next week or so.
I know, right? That's me. I jump on the bandwagon 3 days before it's done.
Right. Well, thank you again. This has been
Yeah.
fascinating. I encourage everyone, if they don't already subscribe to your channel, to please do that. Check it out for more of this excellent kind of perspective that you've been hearing from Paul today. Thank you again, my friend. It was been a pleasure
Thank you.
speaking with you and meeting you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
We hope you have enjoyed this interview. If there is someone you would like to hear from, a well-known creator, or perhaps someone you feel that gets overlooked, please let us know in the comments. And please check out our playlist of past conversations. We appreciate you all. Please remember to like this episode and subscribe for more content like this. And thank you again for joining us for this episode of Courtroom Confidential Conversations.